The massive doors of Zenith Station Educational Complex slid open with a soft hiss, revealing the most advanced school in the galaxy. Students from dozens of different worlds moved through the gleaming hallways, their various forms creating a living rainbow of interspecies cooperation. The Viridians rolled past on their mechanical legs, their metal bodies clicking against the polished floors. Crystalline Chronothai children sang in perfect harmony, their voices creating beautiful music that echoed through the corridors. Energy beings called luminals floated overhead, leaving trails of soft light in their wake. Professor Emma Clark stood near the main entrance, watching the daily parade of alien students with the same wonder she had felt on her first day 5 years ago. As the only human teacher at Zenith Station, she had grown accustomed to being the odd one out. Humans were still relatively new to the galactic community, and many species viewed them with curiosity rather than respect. Today was different, though. Today, the most feared species in the galaxy was bringing their children to school for the first time. Emma checked her tablet, reviewing the files she had read and reread over the past week. The Zerati were legendary throughout the galaxy, but not for reasons that made good bedtime stories. They were apex predators from the dangerous Outer Rim territories, standing 8 feet tall with natural weapons that could tear through metal. Their golden eyes could track movement from incredible distances, and their lean, muscular bodies moved with the fluid grace of born killers. For 300 years, they had been the galaxy's most feared warrior race, conquering entire star systems before the Galactic Alliance finally managed to establish peace treaties with them. The idea of Zerati children attending a normal school was almost unthinkable. Most species had nightmares about adult Zerati, let alone their offspring. A commotion near the main entrance drew Emma's attention. The usual chatter of students and faculty died down to nervous whispers as 2 massive figures entered the complex. Even by Zerati standards, these 2 were impressive. The male stood nearly 9 feet tall, his dark fur marked with the intricate scars that indicated his status as a hunt master. His golden eyes swept the area with the calculating gaze of a predator evaluating potential threats. Beside him, a female Zerati moved with equal grace, her lighter fur bearing the ceremonial markings of a matriarch. Both wore the simple clothing favored by their species, designed not to interfere with their natural weapons. Between them walked 3 smaller figures that were unmistakably their children. Even in their smaller forms, the young Zerati moved like their parents. The largest of the 3, clearly the eldest, positioned himself slightly ahead of his siblings in a protective stance. His head turned constantly, golden eyes tracking every movement in the hallway. The middle child, a female, watched the other students with calculating intelligence, her ears twitching at every sound. The youngest, a male, vibrated with barely contained energy, his tail lashing back and forth as he took in all the new sights and smells around him. Emma watched as her fellow faculty members suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. Professor Williams pretended to study his tablet with intense concentration while slowly backing toward the nearest exit. Dr. Anderson mumbled something about important research and hurried away. Even the usually confident Director Johnson seemed to shrink behind his desk in the administrative office. The Zerati family reached the center of the main hall and stopped. Other students gave them a wide berth, creating an invisible circle of fear around the newcomers. Some of the younger alien children began to cry, while others hid behind their older classmates. The 3 Zerati younglings seemed to notice this reaction, their ears drooping slightly as they realized they were not welcome. The Huntmaster's deep voice carried easily across the silent hall. "I am Marcus. This is my mate Rebecca and our 3 cubs. We come as agreed by the peace treaty to begin cultural integration." Director Johnson's voice crackled over the intercom system, slightly shaky despite his attempt to sound official. "Welcome to Zenith Station Educational Complex. We are honored by your presence. However, we need to address the matter of supervision for your younglings during their integration period. Standard protocols require a faculty member to oversee new students from unfamiliar species." Emma could almost hear the collective holding of breath from her colleagues. She looked around the hallway and saw the truth written on every face she could see. No one wanted this assignment. No one was brave enough or foolish enough to volunteer to babysit the children of the galaxy's most feared predators. The silence stretched uncomfortably long. The 3 Zerati younglings seemed to sense the rejection, moving closer together in a defensive cluster. Their parents' expressions remained neutral, but Emma caught the slight tension in their shoulders, the way their claws extended just slightly from their fingertips. Emma had spent 5 years at Zenith Station learning that every species had something valuable to offer. She had seen Viridian logic solve impossible problems, witnessed Chronothai harmony heal emotional wounds, and watched luminal energy create beauty beyond imagination. Looking at the 3 young Zerati, she did not see monsters or killers. She saw children who were scared and unwelcome in a place that was supposed to be safe. Without giving herself time to think about the risks, Emma stepped forward into the circle of silence. "I will do it." The words hung in the air like a challenge thrown down in an ancient arena. Emma's voice had been clear and confident, but now she could feel the weight of every eye in the hallway focused on her. The silence that followed her declaration was so complete that she could hear the soft humming of the station's life support systems. Professor Williams dropped his tablet. The clattering sound on the metal floor seemed impossibly loud in the quiet hall. Dr. Anderson's mouth hung open like a fish gasping for air. Even the alien students had stopped their nervous shuffling to stare at the human teacher who had just volunteered for what many considered a death sentence. Director Johnson's voice came through the intercom again, this time with obvious concern. "Professor Clark, perhaps you should take some time to consider this decision. The Zerati younglings are in their most unpredictable developmental phase. Their hunting instincts are still forming, and they may not yet understand the difference between play and actual predation." Emma took another step forward, moving closer to the Zerati family. The three younglings watched her approach with intense golden eyes, their heads tilted slightly like curious cats. She could see the intelligence behind their predatory features, the way they evaluated her movements and posture. They were deciding if she was a threat, prey, or something else entirely. "I have considered it," Emma replied, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "And my decision stands." The massive huntmaster, Marcus, turned his full attention to the small human female who dared to approach his family. His golden eyes studied her with the same intensity his children had shown, but there was something else in his gaze now. Surprise, perhaps, or maybe confusion. In all his years of dealing with other species, none had ever volunteered to care for Zerati young. Most barely tolerated the presence of adult Zerati, let alone offered to supervise their most dangerous life stage. "You understand what you offer, human Emma?" Marcus asked, his deep voice rumbling like distant thunder. "Our young are not like the soft cubs of other species. They have claws that can cut metal and teeth that can crush bone. Their play might kill you by accident." Emma knelt down to bring herself closer to eye level with the three younglings. The movement caused several faculty members to gasp audibly, and she heard Professor Williams whisper urgently to someone about calling security. But Emma kept her focus on the young Zerati, studying their faces as carefully as they studied hers. The largest youngling, who she guessed was the eldest, stepped slightly forward. His protective instincts were clearly already well developed. "I am Tom," he announced in a voice that was a miniature version of his father's growl. "This is my sister Lucy and my brother Jack." He gestured to the other two with a surprisingly formal air. Lucy, the middle child, watched Emma with calculating eyes that reminded her of her mother. There was intelligence there that went beyond simple animal cunning. She was evaluating Emma's strengths and weaknesses, determining if this strange human posed any threat to her family. Jack, the youngest, could barely contain his excitement at meeting someone new. His tail swished back and forth rapidly, and his ears perked forward with interest. Despite his predatory features, there was something almost puppy-like in his enthusiasm. "Hello Tom, Lucy, and Jack," Emma said with a warm smile. "I am very pleased to meet you all. I think we are going to have some interesting times together." The Zerati matriarch, Rebecca, stepped forward. Her movement was graceful but held an undertone of barely controlled power. "You show no fear scent," she observed, her voice softer than her mates but no less commanding. "Other species leak fear chemicals when they approach us. But you smell of curiosity and determination." Emma stood up slowly, keeping her movements calm and non-threatening. "Fear is not always useful. Sometimes it prevents us from seeing opportunities to learn and grow." Behind her, she could hear her colleagues whispering among themselves. The words insane and suicidal came up several times. Professor Williams was already pulling out his communication device, probably to notify the medical bay that they might have an emergency soon. Marcus and Rebecca exchanged a look that held entire conversations. As bonded mates and experienced parents, they could communicate volumes with just a glance. Emma could not understand their silent language, but she could see them weighing options and making decisions. "Very well," Marcus announced finally. "We accept your offer, human Emma. But know that if harm comes to our young under your care, the peace treaty will not protect you. And if harm comes to you from our young," Rebecca added, "we will honor your sacrifice, but we cannot undo what their nature might drive them to do." Emma nodded seriously. "I understand the risks. But I also believe that understanding between our species starts with trust. Someone has to take the first step." Director Johnson's voice crackled over the intercom once more. If Professor Clark is determined to proceed, we will support her decision. However, I want daily reports and immediate notification of any incidents. The three Zerati younglings moved closer to Emma, forming a small circle around her. Tom maintained his protective stance, while Lucy continued her careful evaluation. Jack's excitement was infectious, and Emma found herself smiling at his obvious joy in the situation. "When do we start?" Emma asked. Marcus looked at his mate, then at his children, and finally back at the brave human teacher. "Now." The hallway slowly returned to its normal activity as students and faculty processed what they had just witnessed. But Emma Clark had just changed the course of interspecies relations forever. 3 days had passed since Emma began her new role as supervisor to the Zerati younglings, and her small office had become a disaster zone of incident reports. The stack of papers on her desk told a story that would have terrified most species in the galaxy. Tom, Lucy, and Jack had managed to turn Zenith Station into their personal hunting ground in less than 72 hours. The first incident involved 2 maintenance drones that had been hunted in the lower corridors. The mechanical units were found in pieces, their parts scattered like the remains of prey animals. The second report described how Jack had somehow managed to crawl through the ventilation system and drop down behind Professor Williams during his advanced mathematics lecture, causing the elderly Viridian to short-circuit 3 of his mechanical limbs in surprise. The third incident was perhaps the most dramatic. All 3 younglings had turned the main cafeteria into their hunting territory during lunch period. They had worked together like a pack of wolves, with Lucy using her cunning to drive prey toward Tom's position while Jack created chaos from above by leaping between tables. Their prey had been the automated serving units, which now resembled expensive scrap metal. Instead of filing disciplinary reports or calling for the younglings to be removed from the station, Emma found herself doing something completely different. She was studying their behavior patterns with the fascination of a scientist discovering a new species. Emma sat in her office, reviewing security footage of the cafeteria incident on her tablet. She watched as the 3 Zerati children moved with perfect coordination, each one playing their role in the hunt with instinctive precision. Their movements were not random or destructive. They were following ancient patterns programmed into their DNA, patterns that had allowed their species to survive and thrive on one of the galaxy's most dangerous worlds. A soft knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Jack's head peeked around the corner, his golden eyes bright with excitement. In his mouth, he carried the mangled remains of a cleaning drone, its lights still blinking weakly. Most teachers would have screamed. Emma smiled. "Jack, that is excellent tracking work," she said, setting down her tablet and giving the youngling her full attention. "Show me exactly how you caught it." The effect on Jack was immediate and remarkable. His entire body language changed from cautious uncertainty to proud confidence. His chest puffed out as he dropped his prize at Emma's feet and began to demonstrate his hunting technique. He crouched low, showing her how he had waited in the shadows near the supply closet. His movements were fluid and precise as he recreated his careful stalking approach, the lightning-fast pounce, and the killing bite that had disabled the drone's central processor. "On my home world Earth," Emma explained as Jack finished his demonstration, "humans used to hunt in similar ways. We called it persistence hunting. We would track our prey for many hours or even days, using our endurance and intelligence rather than pure strength to make the kill." Jack's ears perked forward with intense interest. "Your species hunts too?" "We used to, long ago. Now we do different kinds of hunting. We hunt for knowledge, for understanding, for ways to protect the people we care about." Emma pulled up images on her tablet showing human warriors throughout history. There were pictures of ancient hunters with spears, medieval knights in armor, and modern soldiers protecting their communities. Tom and Lucy appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of conversation. Tom immediately positioned himself where he could watch both the corridor and his siblings, his protective instincts never relaxing. Lucy approached the tablet with her characteristic calculating gaze, studying the images with intense focus. "You guard your pack?" Tom asked, his young voice carrying the weight of genetic programming that made protection of family the highest priority. "Always," Emma confirmed without hesitation. "Just like you guard Lucy and Jack. That is one of the most important things any species can do." Lucy stepped closer to examine a picture of human firefighters rescuing people from a burning building. These humans risk death to save others who are not their blood family. "Yes. Humans believe that sometimes the strongest hunters are those who choose to protect instead of kill." Emma scrolled through more images, showing doctors saving lives, teachers protecting students, and parents caring for children of all species. True strength is not just about being able to destroy your enemies. It is also about being able to save your friends. The three younglings exchanged one of their rapid silent communications, their ears twitching and tails moving in patterns that Emma was beginning to recognize as their family language. When they finished their conversation, Tom stepped forward as their spokesman. "We understand hunting for food and territory," he said carefully. "But this hunting you speak of, hunting to protect and save, this is new thinking for us." "It does not have to replace your natural instincts," Emma assured them. "Your hunting skills, your coordination, your ability to work as a team, these are all valuable abilities. The question is how you choose to use them." Jack bounded excitedly around the small office. "Can you teach us more about protective hunting?" Emma laughed at his enthusiasm. "I can teach you everything I know. But first, you must teach me more about your hunting techniques. If we are going to learn from each other, the teaching must go both ways." For the first time since their arrival at Zenith Station, the three Zerati younglings looked truly happy. They had found someone who did not fear their nature but instead wanted to understand and learn from it. The emergency alarm started screaming through Zenith Station at exactly 2:30 in the afternoon. Emma was in Environmental Lab 7 with Tom, Lucy, and Jack, showing them how different plants from various worlds had adapted to survive in harsh conditions. The lesson had been going well, with the younglings showing genuine interest in how living things could change and grow stronger when faced with challenges. When the first alarm sounded, Emma thought it might be another drill. Zenith Station ran safety exercises every few weeks to keep everyone prepared for emergencies. But then the heavy containment door slammed shut with a loud bang that shook the walls. The normal white lights flickered off and were replaced by the harsh red glow of emergency lighting. That was when Emma knew this was not a drill. Director Johnson's voice came through the communication system, but it was broken up by static and interference. "System malfunction in Section C, life support failure in progress. Evacuation teams are responding to affected areas. All personnel should remain calm and wait for assistance." The voice cut off completely, leaving them in silence except for the continuing wail of the alarm. Emma pulled out her tablet and checked the environmental readings for their section. Her heart sank as she saw the numbers. The atmospheric processes for this part of the station were failing. Oxygen levels were dropping steadily while carbon dioxide was building up. According to her calculations, they had maybe 20 minutes of breathable air left before the situation became deadly. She tried her communication device, but got only static. The malfunction had knocked out most of the station's internal systems. They were trapped in a sealed room with failing life support, and no way to call for help. "Miss Emma," Tom's voice was steady and calm despite his young age. "We can smell fear scent coming from the corridor outside. Many people are afraid." Emma realized the horrible truth that Tom had already figured out. The rescue teams were outside in the hallway, but they were too scared to enter a sealed room that contained three Zerati younglings. Even though Tom, Lucy, and Jack were just children, the adult rescuers saw them as dangerous predators. The fear that had kept other species away from the Zerati for centuries was now preventing help from reaching them. "Then we will have to save ourselves," Emma said, trying to keep her voice confident and strong. "What can you tell me about this room? Use all of your senses." The transformation in the three younglings was immediate and amazing. Their casual, relaxed behavior disappeared, replaced by the focused intensity of their hunting instincts. But instead of becoming threatening or scary, they became incredibly alert and aware of everything around them. Jack was the smallest and most agile of the three. He immediately began exploring every corner of the room, his nose twitching as he followed air currents and scents. "There is moving air coming from the upper left ventilation grate," he reported. "The passage beyond smells like the main corridor near the library." Lucy used her sharp eyes and clever mind to examine the room's structure. She studied the walls, floor, and ceiling like an engineer looking for weak points. "The storage units against the far wall are not properly secured," she announced. "Behind them, there is a support beam that shows metal fatigue. The beam is old and has been weakened by years of vibration from the station's engines." Tom positioned himself near the sealed door, ready to defend against any threat that might try to enter. But he also used his size and strength to test different parts of the room. "The door mechanism is completely locked down by the emergency systems. But if we can reach the manual release from inside the ventilation system, it might still work." Emma felt a surge of hope as she listened to their reports. Working together, they might actually have a chance to escape. She looked at her tablet again. The oxygen levels were still dropping, but they had maybe 15 minutes left. "Jack, you are small enough to fit in the ventilation system. Can you reach the emergency release mechanism from inside the air ducts? Emma asked. The youngest Zarati nodded eagerly. Yes, I can smell the metal and electronics of the door controls through the airflow. Lucy, can you and I move those storage units? We need to get to that weak support beam. Emma was already moving toward the heavy containers. Tom, when we expose that beam, I need you to use your natural strength to bend it. If we can create a structural weakness in the right place, we might be able to break through to the next room. The three younglings worked with the coordination of a pack that had hunted together for years. Jack squeezed into the narrow ventilation shaft, his voice echoing back to them as he moved through the metal tunnels. Lucy helped Emma push and pull the heavy storage units, her clever mind figuring out the best angles to move the awkward containers. Tom waited patiently until they had cleared the wall, then positioned himself at the weakened beam. When Emma gave the signal, he grabbed the metal with his powerful claws and pulled with all his strength. The beam groaned and bent, creating a gap in the wall large enough for a person to squeeze through. At the same moment, Jack's voice called out from the ventilation system. I found the manual release. The door is opening. Fresh air rushed into the room as both the door and the wall breach opened. Emma and the three younglings had turned their natural abilities into an escape plan that saved all their lives. The rescue team outside stared in amazement as the human teacher and three Zarati children emerged from what should have been their tomb. The security footage from Environmental Lab 7 spread across the galactic communication networks faster than light itself. Within hours, beings from every corner of known space were watching the impossible scene unfold on their screens. A small human female and three Zarati younglings working together in perfect harmony, their combined efforts turning certain death into miraculous escape. The video showed everything. Jack squeezing through ventilation shafts that would have trapped larger beings. Lucy using her intelligence to identify structural weaknesses that trained engineers had missed. Tom applying his natural strength with surgical precision to bend metal without causing a dangerous collapse. And Emma, coordinating their efforts like a conductor leading the galaxy's most unlikely orchestra. Emma sat in Director Johnson's office 3 days after the incident, feeling somewhat overwhelmed by all the attention their escape had generated. Tom stood protectively at her right side, his golden eyes constantly scanning the room for potential threats. Lucy perched on the arm of Emma's chair, while Jack had claimed the spot directly behind Emma's legs, his tail wrapped around her ankle like a furry safety belt. The three younglings had not left Emma's side since the rescue. They had adopted her as part of their family pack, and Zarati pack bonds were unbreakable. Huntmaster Marcus and Matriarch Rebecca stood behind their offspring, their massive forms somehow managing to fit into the office without making the space feel cramped. Their golden eyes held something that Emma had never seen in a Zarati before, wonder mixed with deep respect. The younglings have developed in ways we did not expect, Marcus said, his deep voice carrying across the room. They still possess all their natural hunting instincts, but they have learned something new. They have learned to hunt for protection instead of destruction. They were always capable of this, Emma replied, running her fingers through Jack's coarse fur. The youngest Zarati leaned into her touch like a cat seeking affection. They just needed someone to show them that their abilities could be used to save lives instead of taking them. Director Johnson cleared his throat nervously. Since the incident, his attitude toward the Zarati family had changed completely. The footage had shown him, along with everyone else, that these so-called monsters had risked everything to save a human teacher who had shown them kindness. Professor Clark, we have received requests from 17 different Zarati families asking for human supervisors for their own younglings, Johnson announced. The Galactic Education Council has also expressed interest in expanding this program to other stations throughout the galaxy. Emma looked down at Tom, who was watching the adults with the serious expression he wore when making important decisions. What do you think? Should we help teach other Zarati children? Tom's response came without hesitation. Yes. Other young ones like us should learn that hunting can mean protecting. But they will need teachers who understand both sides of the hunt. Rebecca stepped forward, her graceful movement drawing everyone's attention. The human Emma has given us a gift more valuable than peace treaties or trade agreements. She has given our children a future where they can be both Zarati and something more. But we need more teachers like Miss Emma, Lucy added with her characteristic intelligence. Other humans who can see past fear to find understanding. Director Johnson nodded eagerly. We can arrange for additional human staff to be trained in Zarati cultural integration. Professor Clark will lead the program, of course. I accept, Emma said without hesitation. But we will need to change how we think about integration. This is not about making Zarati children less dangerous. This is about teaching them to use their natural abilities in new ways. 6 months later, Emma stood in her greatly expanded classroom, watching a scene that would have seemed impossible just a year earlier. Tom was demonstrating proper stalking techniques to a mixed group of students that included Viridian, Chronothai, and human children. His movements were precise and deadly, but his purpose was educational rather than threatening. Lucy had appointed herself as a confidence-building specialist, working with nervous students from various species to help them overcome their fears. Her patient explanations and gentle encouragement had helped dozens of young beings find their inner strength. Jack served as the official welcome committee for new students. His infectious enthusiasm and boundless energy made even the most frightened newcomers feel at home within minutes of arrival. The classroom was filled with the sounds of interspecies learning. Zerati younglings practiced problem-solving skills alongside their traditional hunting exercises. Other species children learned about courage and determination from beings they had once feared. Most importantly, they were all learning that differences between species could be sources of strength rather than reasons for conflict. Outside the classroom windows, the hallways of Zenith Station bustled with activity that reflected the new reality. Zerati parents worked alongside Viridian engineers on technical projects. Chronothai artists collaborated with human designers to create beautiful spaces that celebrated all species. The fear that had once kept species apart was being replaced by curiosity and mutual respect. Emma watched her students and felt a deep sense of satisfaction. The 3 Zerati younglings who had once been feared and unwelcome were now beloved teachers and friends to children from across the galaxy. They had kept their natural abilities and instincts, but they had learned to use them in service of protection rather than destruction. The program had become so successful that other stations throughout the galaxy were requesting their own human Zerati teaching teams. What had started as one teacher volunteering to babysit 3 frightening children had grown into a galaxy-wide movement that was changing the way species related to each other. Emma smiled as she watched Tom help a young Chronothai student overcome his fear of heights, Lucy teach problem-solving to eager Viridian pupils, and Jack make a group of human children laugh with his playful antics. Sometimes the most important lessons came from the most unexpected teachers.